Beyond the Walls Part 2. When I was a young child, I lived in a walled ghetto called Liberio with my family. Many people like us were forced in these places because we were considered monsters. My childlike nature refused to accept it when my sister wanted to see a flying ship land. For her sake, I managed to slip past the guards and leave Liberio. Outside, we were met with glares and hatred, even though we were just children. We managed to make it to the landing pad of the ship. I was content to see my sister's ecstatic face, but we were caught by two public securities. I volunteered to take physical punishment for my sister. I was beaten, and my sister was taken away by one of the officers. The officer still remaining told me to stay with him and watch the ship land. When I got home later that day, my sister wasn't around. She was found in the river the next day. The officers met with my parents in our home. The one who took my sister said to them that he didn't know what happened to her after he left her at the gate. I knew this man from the Mali Public Security Authorities was lying. He was skipping out on his job and sleeping by the riverside. He could not have been busy. My mother was overwhelmed by sorrow, while my father demeaned himself in front of these men. When I saw my father and this man, I held so much hate for them that I began to feel dizzy. But even more than that, I cursed my own foolishness. That doesn't explain anything, Levi interrupted Optimus, causing the Prime to look at him. Why were they discriminated against? And what the hell's a Mali? Optimus grabbed another one of the books and opened it to the first page. Over 1,800 years ago, Fritz, the progenitor of the Eldians, made a contract with the devil of all Earth and acquired the power of the Titans. Using the power of the Titans, cultivated the wastelands, built the roads, and constructed the bridges, bringing abundance to the land and wealth to the Eldian people. Ma's power built the Eldian Empire, and when she died it was divided among the 9 Titans. The Empire then brought Shu into the great and ancient nation of Mali and became the conqueror of the continent. Now possessing the power to become Titans, these subjects of Ma, the Eldian people, oppressed and subjugated other races for about the next 1,700 years, even conducting ethnic cleansing. The Eldian Empire had grown arrogant after 1,700 years, eventually allowing Mali to work from within and instigate a civil war, causing it to grow weak. Mali was also able to acquire 7 of the 9 Titans, winning the Great Titan War about 100 years ago and defeating Eldia. While Fritz, the 145th Eldian king, had inherited the founding Titan with its ability to rule and control all other Titans, he made the decision to renounce war, moving to the remote island of Paradis along with some other Eldians. There, he built 3 layers of walls and hid inside them. Meanwhile, the Eldians who held out and were left behind on the continent were segregated into internment zones, forced to live under Mali's tyrannical rule. Well, shit, Hanji spoke. So while we have wanted the Titans dead, there's an entire nation that despises us as well, Pixis declared. From what we know so far, it seems the entire world hates us for what our ancestors have done, Erwin said. Shall I continue? Optimus asked. Hanji nodded her head, allowing Optimus to continue reading from Grisha's early life. My father told me the history of our ancestors. For someone who lost his daughter, he looked content with belittling his ancestors and defending his masters like a dog. I told him that the officer knew something, that my sister and I didn't do anything wrong, but my father told me to be quiet. A simple rumor could get us all sent to Paradis, and forced into becoming Titans for all eternity. My father wanted me to remain quiet, and accept the reality that I was born into for the sake of my family that was still alive. Who was in the wrong? Was it me or the world? Maybe it was both. I was foolish and ignorant while the world was unfair and insane. I discovered my own path when I was 18, making plans to take over my father's clinic, until a patient came in and told me about the death of my sister. I worked with medicine, but I also bore a deep hatred for the Mali government. The underground anti-establishment group known as the Eldia Restorationists took note of these two and came to recruit me. When I learned the truth about what happened to my little sister, how she was practically torn apart by dogs, I made a vow to myself. I'd teach them who the true devils were. What our ancestors had done was right. If we wanted to set the world right once more, we had to bring Eldia back to power. "Oh look, Buckethead, it's you," Hanji remarked. "In my youth I fought for the equality of Cybertronians," Megatron explained as he continued staring out the window. "That ignorant fool wanted to put his people back into power once more and oppress his enemy. If he had gotten what he wanted, how long would it have taken for Mali to overthrow them once more? The cycle would continue and nothing would have been solved." "But you would have so much to talk about," Hanji said in a fake, sweet voice. Optimus gave a disapproving look to Hanji while Megatron flipped her off without looking at her. "Let's just get back to the story," Erwin said. Optimus quietly sighed before he continued. "The informant led the restorationists from the shadows as the owl. The owl supplied us with weapons and funds, and gave us historical documents that Eldians in those days had forgotten about. It told us that Ymir used her powers to build bridges and cities, allowing Eldia to flourish. At least, that's what I interpreted. The owl then sent us a descendant of the royal family, a woman named Dinah Fritz. I decided to devote myself to wherever fate took me. She was from a branch in the royal family that refused to flee the island at the end of the Great Titan War and stayed on the continent. She was the only descendant left. Her family waited for the day that Eldia would rise again, hiding in the internment zone with her knowledge of the Titans. The information she brought us was nothing short of a path to victory. The issue was retrieving the power of the 145th king, who chose to hide behind the walls. Dinah told us that the king refused to fight. Infighting between the houses of certain Titans grew too much and often led to more conflicts. We vowed to take that power, no matter long it took and what was ahead of us. Dinah and I married the next year and we were blessed with a baby boy. His name was Zeke. "What?" Hanji questioned. "What's wrong? Why is that important?" Mikasa asked. "Bertolt told us that was the name of the beast Titan," Hanji explained. "Are you sure that not a coincidence?" Pixis asked. "I wish it was," Optimus admitted, "but if a person of royal blood has the ability to control other Titans, would that also apply to a Titan shifter that didn't have the powers of the founding Titan?" "That would explain Connie's village," Hanji answered. "The beast Titan managed to turn and control the people there during the night. If a person of royal blood managed to do that, it's somewhat terrifying what they could do with the powers of the founding Titan. Which raises the question, why did the descendants never choose to use the powers of the founding Titan to fight back against Mali?" Erwin said. "Because the will of the king was forced onto them as well," Historia declared. "They inherited the memories of the outside, but that also came with the will of the king as well, the refusal to fight. If the user chose to try and fight, the will was stronger, and it nearly drives the user mad. So this power is practically useless," Megatron proclaimed. "I wouldn't say that," Hanji retorted. "A human of royal blood is the only one able to access this power, and even when given to one of royal blood, they are overwhelmed by an ancestor's will," Megatron explained. "None of the descendants have been strong enough to break this. It's better to have it in our possession than in the enemy," Erwin declared. "That should buy us time to figure out how to use it." Optimus glanced over at Iren before he continued onward. One age to another, and people changed. Just as the world was growing rapidly, a turning point came for the Eldia Restorationists. The Mali government proclaimed the king was going to attack the mainland and wipe out everyone. They stated that they enlist Eldian children between the ages of 5 and 7 to inherit the powers of the 7 Titans in Mali's possession. If they succeeded, they and their families would become honorary Malians. Back then, it didn't make sense for the king to attack. When the king left, he declared, "If you ever try to interfere in our affairs, the tens of millions of titans that sleep inside the walls will surely flatten the earth. The owl informed us that the reason Mali was going after Paradis was to increase their military might. The nations around them were advancing in technology, guaranteeing the Titans' power would not be absolute. Paradis also had untouched minerals that could benefit any nation that could get their hands on it. However, the goals of Mali and the restorationists remained the same, to take back the founding Titan without provoking the king. I decided to make my son, Zeke, a warrior so that he may infiltrate Paradis and take that power. We allowed him to pledge his loyalty to the enemy as a ruse to gain their trust. But in the end, I was still the same foolish child I was on that day. Around the time my son turned 7, he betrayed both me and my wife to the Mali government. The revivalists were all sent to heaven, where we would be doomed to wander around Paradis as mindless titans for all eternity. It was too late by the time I realized it. I should have realized it. It was the same thing that was done to me. I never treated Zeke as my son. I only saw him as a child of royal blood and savior of Eldia. So Zeke had every right to sell out his parents who foolishly put their child in danger, in exchange for the safety of his grandparents and himself. I was tortured for days as the Mali government demanded that I reveal who the owl was. Even though I told them I didn't know, they still tortured me and took me to heaven along with my comrades. One by one, I watched my comrades injected with Titan spinal fluid and pushed down walls before they were turned into Titans. During this time, I also remembered the commanding officer at this time. He was the one who murdered my sister, and he was the one who injected my wife and forced her to become a Titan. I called him out on it, told him that what he was doing was wrong. But he told me that it didn't matter what I believed, the people of the world wanted us gone because we were the only ones that could turn into monsters. He almost pushed me down to face another Titan, but another soldier pushed him down instead and saved my life. The man who did this was the same man who told me to watch the ship land. He was the owl, and he was also a Titan shifter. He attacked the Mali forces that took us to the island, and by the time they ran out of ammunition, the owl, now a Titan, crushed their steamed ships into dust, which he spread across the ocean. Soon he squeezed the soldiers dry and threw them into the ocean as well. He wiped out their existence and whatever trace of them being on the island. He revealed himself to be Iren Kruger, a subject of Yma that managed to falsify his information to the Mali government. He told me he wanted to restore Eldia, but in order to do so he had to play the part of Mali by cutting off fingers and turning Eldians of all ages into Titans. He even stated that he allowed Dinah to be turned into a Titan, instead of being used to breed more descendants of royal blood. I was furious with him, but I listened to him. I listened to his story and his reason for choosing me. I didn't want to continue his mission then, but he told me he could no longer do it himself because of the curse of Yma. Curse? Levi questioned. Optimus grabbed the book regarding the history of the Titans and flipped to the page regarding the curse. The curse of Yma. Yma Fritz died 13 years after receiving her powers. As a result, no one can exceed said power. So whoever becomes a Titan shifter, will die within 13 years. Iren stopped looking down at his hands to see that all eyes at the table were on him. He even glanced over at Megatron to see even he was tense, but the ex-con didn't look his way. Iren, Hanji began, when did you get your powers? 5 years ago, Iren answered, when Wall Maria fell. That means you only have 8 years left to live, Pixis concluded. Mikasa quickly got up from her chair and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Optimus looked at the door in sorrow before turning his attention to Iren. You're allowed to leave, Optimus told him. I'm going to stay, Iren said. Megatron glanced over and noticed the heartbreak in the Prime's eyes that the others didn't see, but didn't say much to it as he looked back out the window. Is there any way to reverse this? Erwin asked. No, Optimus answered, "It only continues to explain that if powers of the Titans haven't been inherited, then it will be transferred to an Eldian baby. The baby does not have to be related in any way to the previous holder. They are paths that transcend physical science and are connected to the founding Titan." "Anything else in Grisha's early life?" Levi asked. Optimus looked down at the first notebook. "I didn't wish to continue fighting. I underestimated the price of freedom being too high, and I led everyone else to their deaths. I had nothing left except for my sins. However, Kruger told me he didn't choose me because of my hatred for Marley. He chose me because I went beyond the walls with my sister on that day. It was because I sought freedom. The deaths of the people around me were not going to be paid until I achieved that goal. If I wanted to save everyone, I needed to stand and fight. So I stood, and chose to fight, and I chose to accept the power of the Attack Titan." Optimus flipped to the next page to see that it was blank. That is all the information in his early life. "So then, what will be our next move?" Pixis asked. "The meeting tomorrow morning," Historia declared. "We can explain the information there and determine what we should do with it, and whether or not we should address it to the public. For now, the meeting is over. We should take the time to process the information." Eren watched as Optimus and Megatron deactivated their hollow forms before heading for the door and leaving the room before everyone else. He managed to reach a safe enough distance from everyone else in the castle before he sat down and began to cry. Erwin sat down at his desk in his office while Levi pulled up a chair and sat in front of him. Erwin sighed in irritation before reaching under his desk and pulling out a wine bottle and a glass cup. "What are you going to do?" Levi demanded. "I told myself that if I ever found the truth of the outside, that I would quietly celebrate by drinking an entire bottle of wine, and doing something stupid," Erwin explained. "Odd thing for you to do," Levi admitted. "I still haven't turned in my resignation form," Erwin said as he poured himself a glass, "so I'm considering this my I quit statement." "I'm guessing you're ecstatic to be proven right," Levi assumed. "Yes and no," Erwin admitted as he took a sip. "I'm content we discovered the information, but that just makes our situation more complicated. We're not going up against Titans now, we're fighting against our own kind. The entire world wants us gone." "Do you really want to relinquish your command now?" Levi asked. "I figured out the truth of this world," Erwin answered as he drank some more wine. "That was the main reason I joined the Survey Corps. Now that I know the truth, I have no reason to continue being commander. I will help Hanji with reports and paperwork, but other than that, I'm making her the commander. Besides, continuing to be the commander would practically mean shitting on the graves of the people that died under me." "You're still a good commander," Levi retorted. "But not a good man," Erwin declared. "Do you really think any of us are good people anymore?" Levi asked. "You're a lot better than I am," Erwin stated. "I tried to kill you," Levi reminded. Erwin finished the wine in his cup before pouring himself another glass. "It was justified. And since the world is our enemy, we need Optimus and Megatron now more than ever. Nations, armies greater than our usual 100 core members. It's not the first time we've been outnumbered before," Levi reminded. "But the world is changing," Erwin declared, "and if we decide to release the information to the public, there's no going back. We're going to enter a new age." Levi sighed. "Titans might seem like a blessing in disguise soon." "They most likely will be," Erwin declared as he stared out the window and watched the sky turn into a mixed shade of orange and yellow. "Our form of normal is gone." Levi watched Erwin drink from his cup of wine. "By the way, I'm going to knock you out if you take your stupid stunt too far." "Permission granted," Erwin said. "Mind telling me what it will be?" Levi questioned. "I haven't decided," Erwin answered, making Levi even more concerned. "So what do you think was in the basement?" Sasha asked Armin as he, Jean and Connie were all walking to their room. "I'm not sure," Armin admitted. "I'm still not sure." "Let's hope it's something useful," Connie said, "like a weapon to kill the Titans." "What weapon would Grisha have in that basement?" Jean remarked. "It would have to be something Raina and Bertolt knew and didn't want us to know," Armin explained. "Grisha knew and he was a Titan shifter. Maybe it was something only known to." All four of them stopped when they heard someone crying. They all followed the noise to the girls' dorm area and opened the door. All four of them were shocked to see Mikasa curled up in a ball at the end of her bed. She held her scarf close to her chest as tears streamed down her face. "Mikasa!" Armin exclaimed as he moved past the others and kneeled down next to her. "Mikasa, what happened?" "Eren," Mikasa stuttered as she tried to provide an explanation through her tears. "Mikasa, take a deep breath," Armin instructed. "In and out, Commande." Mikasa struggled to take deep breaths as Sasha, Jean, and Connie looked at each other with worry. "Okay, now tell me what's wrong," Armin requested. "He's going to die in 8 years," Mikasa said. "The Titan power doesn't last forever, and Eren is going to die in 8 years." Armin was unable to process the information, making him as still as stone. Sasha then walked into the room and knelt down in front of Mikasa. "Hey," Sasha greeted with a soft smile. "Mikasa, how about we go to the dining hall and get something to eat? Maybe having a full stomach might help you better process the situation." Mikasa looked Sasha with tears in her eyes and nodded her head. She allowed the hunter to help her to her feet and escort her out of the room with Jean and Connie. Armin awoke from his shock and bolted out the room towards Mikasa. "Where's Eren?" Armin demanded. Mikasa stared at Armin before looking down at the ground. I don't know. Mikasa wasn't able to finish as Armin ran off to go find Eren. Eren managed to force himself to travel to his room and shut the door behind them. He slumped down to the floor and leaned against the door. Eren then removed the key from around his neck and looked intently at it. He thought that getting to the basement would finally lead to an end to the Titan's reign, but now, he was left with more questions and a lack of satisfaction. Now, he didn't have that much time left to live. 8 years. Only 8 years left and he would turn to dust. He thought that he would make it out of this with all the time he needed to live out the rest of his life and travel with Mikasa and Armin and see the places they were denied. Now that dream was never going to happen. "Eren," Armin called out as he knocked on the door to his room. "Eren, are you in there?" Eren didn't want to, but he forced himself to stand up and open the door slightly to see Armin's worried face. "What do you want, Armin?" Eren demanded in a rather harsh tone. "Eren, what happened?" "Mikasa said you only have 8 years left to live," Armin said. "Is that true? Please tell me that isn't true." Eren stared at the floor. "It is. That's what my father left behind. Humanity's not extinct and Titan shifters are only allowed 13 years left to live. The entire world hates us, okay? Now just leave me alone." Armin felt like he was going to throw up as he tried to find out if Eren was lying. But Eren. That can't be right. "It's true," Eren declared. "There's no hope. No freedom outside the wall. That dream is dead." "We can still find a way," Armin said. "We can find our freedom and—" "Armin, that dream is dead," Eren shouted as he forced the door wide open to stare Armin in the eye. "Okay? It's gone. I was right, there's no point in trying. So stop trying." "Eren, you can't say that," Armin retorted. "We don't know the whole situation." "You don't." "I do," Eren declared. "They killed my father's sister because she just wanted to see a flying ship. They force people like us to turn into Titans. What good will anything do when there are others that look down on us like dirt?" Armin felt something lodged in his throat, and he looked like he was ready to cry. "Don't say that. Just go, Armin." Iren shouted before whispering, "Just go." Iren shut the door and leaned against it once more. He heard Armin's footsteps leave his room before a memory that wasn't his flashed through his head. He gasped in horror as he saw the mangled and bloodied body of a young girl in the grass. He let out a scream of anguish as a surge of emotions rushed through him, causing him to cry in agony. Megatron was leaning against the wall far away from the castle and trying to sleep, but to no avail. He opened an optic to see Optimus still in his alt mode, not moving an inch. Optimus was not handling this news well. At all. Megatron knew that, since Optimus has remained in his alt mode ever since the meeting was over. The Prime was trying to process the information on his own, and when Megatron tried to speak with him about it, he merely drove away in response. He kept on prompting the Prime to talk, but that only resulted in Optimus honking his horn at him. Megatron was trying to be considerate and talk to Optimus about the scenario, but he was refusing. The ex-con was honestly feeling better, since he took his anger out on the Titan shifters. But Optimus has been on this world longer than he has and was just as in the dark as the humans were. If they did release the information to the rest of the walls, what would that exactly mean? Especially considering Historia's position among the people and how some have misgivings about her. And then there was Optimus' pet. Of course there was Historia's possible conjux Endura, but he had no clue as to which side she was on. According to her, the Titan shifter merely wanted to be with Historia, or at the very least see her one last time. But the pet. He chose to save him that night. Was it a wise choice considering his lifespan? He had less than a decade to live. The pet was an emotional mess when he stopped him, but how would all this information affect his mind? The information was already causing heartache to the others. He knew it was hurting Optimus. The Prime got attached to the boy. Meanwhile, Mikasa was constantly keeping an eye on him because she felt like she failed him that night. He didn't know much of the other cadets or their attachment to Iren. And then there was Armin. Did he know? He wasn't in the room. Did the Ackerman tell him? Did anyone tell him? He had to find out. Megatron activated his hollow form before making his way into the castle, ignoring whether or not Optimus saw him. Connie continued to rub Mikasa's back while Jean and Sasha were cooking something for her, despite their initial bickering of what to give her in the beginning. But as they continued to cook, Mikasa explained everything to the three of them regarding what was in Grisha's basement and the outside world. And while all three of them were shocked by the information, they did their best to remain calm and comfort Mikasa, even though all three of them were internally screaming. "So do you know what they're going to do with the information?" Connie asked Mikasa. "I'm not sure," Mikasa admitted. "I left the room before the meeting finished. I think they said they would discuss it with the other branches of military." "Here you go, Mikasa," Sasha said as she placed the food down and handed Mikasa a spoon. "Beef stew from yours truly with an omelette from Horseface. You're going to wake up late one morning and your rations for the day will be gone," Jean warned. "Thank you," Mikasa said, "both of you." "You're welcome," Jean said as they sat down at the table. "This is really good," Mikasa complimented as she began eating. "Of course," Sasha smiled, "we're really good at this. Well, me specifically." "Pixis would beg to differ," Jean reminded with a smirk. "That contest was bullshit, and he was drunk," Sasha retorted. "I could smell the wine off of him from a mile away." Mikasa merely smiled to herself as she continued eating. "So Connie trailed off, do you want tea after this? Do you want to go sleep?" "I should probably wait to sleep," Mikasa admitted. "This is a pretty big meal. If there's anything else we can help you with, let us know," Jean reassured as Sasha's eyes drifted to Megatron passing quickly by the room. Mikasa nodded her head as she continued eating. "How's Iren handling this?" Connie blurted out. "Connie?" Jean hissed. "I don't know," Mikasa answered. We got into a fight regarding the key, and we haven't been really talking except when it came to the mission. Maybe we should check up on him, Connie suggested. What if he does something dangerous again? I don't want to check up on him right now, Mikasa declared. I can't. We can check up on him for you, Jean suggested. We can make sure he doesn't do anything dangerous while you get some well-deserved sleep. I can't do that to you guys, Mikasa retorted. It looks like you really need it, Jean stated. Please. Mikasa thought it over before taking another bite out of her meal. Okay. And if you need anything else, let us know, Connie said, earning a nod from the girl. You know, Buckethead just walked by, Sasha commented. Should we say something? Sasha, what the fuck are we supposed to do? Jean demanded. Anything. Sasha declared. Anything is not going to help. Jean shouted. Megatron searched the entire castle for Armin, but wasn't able to find him. He passed by the other 3 cadets, but chose to ignore them as he heard them talking to Mikasa. He also passed by another room and could have sworn he heard the commander slurring his words while the dwarf listened in. He didn't bother with that and continued onward. The ex-con managed to find a small library in the castle with the lights on and the door slightly open. Megatron pushed the door all the way open and saw many books scattered across the floor and on the desk. He stepped over all of them with ease before seeing Armin sitting down with a notebook in hand. The cadet was writing something down from another book he found from the shelf. You should be sleeping, Megatron remarked to make his presence known. Can't, Armin said. I'm busy. Megatron wasn't sure if Armin realized he was talking to him or someone else, but he continued onward. I'm pretty sure this isn't healthy for you. This isn't the first time I've done this, Armin declared as he closed the notebook and stood up, leaving the book on the ground to go find another. You should be resting, Megatron advised as he followed Armin. I'll sleep when I'm done, Armin declared. It shouldn't be too long. Megatron saw Armin open his notebook once more and saw a page that said Notes on Ocean. Megatron knew it was his dream to see it with Mikasa and Iren, so that meant... Shit. Armin knew about Iren's lifespan. Do the others know you're here? Megatron asked. No, Armin answered as he wrote some other information down. They're with Mikasa. Does Iren know? Megatron asked. The ex-con noticed Armin tensing at the mention of his friend, but didn't answer the question as he continued looking through the books on the shelf. Does Iren know? Megatron prompted once more. Armin merely shut the notebook in response and walked past Megatron to the desk. Megatron huffed and followed Armin. He noticed the boy flipping through some of the open books on the desk and writing stuff down. Alert. Megatron, I'm busy, Armin finally spoke up. I just want to get as much information down. I don't want to talk about anything. If you want to talk about Optimus, for once, just try to talk to him. Megatron was baffled by the boy's response. He didn't expect a response like that from him at all. He was angry, he was grieving. He could see that, but how should he approach this? Armin was about to walk past Megatron, but the ex-con put a hand on his shoulder and pushed him forward. You need to stop this, Megatron said. I don't have to listen to you, Armin retorted. You're not my commanding officer. Well, I don't need to be a medic to know how unhealthy this is for you, Megatron countered. Like you know anything about the human body, Armin shot back. Armin walked back to the desk and was about to open another book, but Megatron slammed his hand down on it to stop Armin. You need to stop this, Megatron ordered. I don't have to listen to you, Armin reminded. I'm advising you. As what? As a friend? Armin interrupted. You already look down on us for being weak and pathetic. You only care about Optimus and your amends to him. I don't need you of all beings to look down on me, and belittle me, and make me feel worse than I already do right now. Megatron felt anger rise in his as he snatched the book from under Armin and threw it to the ground. This foolishness of yours needs to. Armin didn't let the ex-con finish as he threw a book at his face. Megatron was clearly surprised by Armin's action, but that didn't stop the boy from throwing another book at him. I hate you. Armin shouted as Megatron shielded his face. I hate you. I hate you. You bastard. You monster. Eren wants to die because of you. And all you care about are your selfish needs. Not how it affects everyone around you. I wish you'd just disappear. Armin threw the last of the books on the desk before slamming his hands on the table. Just get out. Armin began panting from his outburst before realizing he lost his notebook. He wasn't sure if he threw it or not, so he began to look all over the desk. Megatron lowered his arms and saw Armin's panicked state as he looked all over the floor for the notebook. He should be angry with Armin, but the boy was right. His presence here caused many problems and concerns for this place. And he didn't care who got caught in the crossfire. He didn't care for the humans, but Armin and Mikasa were one of the few that made an effort to understand him. And how did he pay them back? By threatening to harm them, kill them, and caused a friend to nearly commit suicide. By the Allspark, he was a terrible being. Megatron took a step forward and noticed the notebook laying on the ground. He picked it up and walked over to the desk while Armin didn't notice him at all. The ex-con knelt down and handed the notebook to him. Armin stopped what he was doing and glared at him. He snatched the notebook from him and hid under the desk away from view. Megatron sighed as he sat down in front of the cabinet drawers. Alert. Go away, Armin hissed. I don't know much about your world, Megatron continued, but I could tell you of a few things I might know. Armin didn't respond, allowing Megatron to continue onward. Flaming mountains might be one. The humans on Earth called it volcanoes. It spits out magma hot to touch and covers the landscape in red molten rock. Deserts are another one. It's a barren wasteland of sand and not much life can grow there. The sand might get everywhere as well. Canyons are deep gorges in the ground that may sometimes have water but not always. Megatron sighed to himself as he continued. Unfortunately, many of the other places I've seen on Earth are somewhat similar to the island. And other places I would recommend would be out of Earth's orbit. I should have been a little more knowledgeable of these places, but... Why are you still here? Armin demanded. Why are you trying to comfort me? Trying to be nice? You got what you wanted, right? So why should you care now? Megatron merely chuckled. I thought with your intellect, you would have figured it out right now. Get to the point, Armin demanded. Megatron thought it over before deciding to speak up. You were the first that's been willing to listen to my side of the story and understand my struggles. And while you've been willing to understand, I've caused pain and heartache to you and your friends. So if you wish, take your anger out on me. Do whatever you wish. I suppose I owe you this much. Megatron expected Armin to lash out at him again, but he was only met with heavy breathing. He looked under the desk and saw Armin trying to write stuff down in his notebook while tears were coming down his face. Megatron gently took the notebook and pencil from his hands and placed it on top of the desk, forcing Armin to crawl out from under it and try to reach it. Wait, Armin pleaded as he tried to grab it, I still need to pay Eren back. Megatron gently took his hand and removed it from the table. Please don't do this to yourself. But I still need to, Armin proclaimed as more tears fell. Megatron, please Armin was startled when Megatron put a hand on his shoulder. Armin, you're just a child, Megatron declared. You shouldn't be doing this to yourself. You're allowed to feel this way, and I won't judge you for it. I have no right to. Megatron watched Armin's face contorted into one of agony as he finally broke down and began sobbing. Megatron froze in place as Armin hugged the ex-con as a means of comforting himself. I don't want to lose him, Armin wept. I don't want to lose anyone anymore. He and Mikasa did everything for me. They saved my life, and I'm going to lose him. I don't want to." Megatron grimaced in anger at the boy's grief. He wasn't angry at the boy. He was angry at himself. There was nothing he could do to lift his worries. He couldn't tell him that everything would be all right. They were children losing a hopeless battle. He would be lying to him and that wouldn't help at all. The ex-con then raised his hand, hesitating for a moment at the idea, but he let his pride and fear go as he placed his hand on Armin's head. Megatron's anger turned into one of understanding as he patted the boy's head. "Thank you for staying," Armin whimpered. Megatron didn't respond as he let Armin grieve. He owed him that much. Eren sat at the foot of his bed as the sun continued to rise. He didn't get that much sleep the previous night. He tried, but having access to the truth unlocked a floodgate of memories from his father that haunted him. He only got 2 hours of sleep before staying up the rest of the night. Eren forced himself to stand up and change out of his clothes into his uniform. There was going to be a meeting regarding the information, and he needed to be there, regardless of if he wanted to. Eren finished changing and opened the door to leave his room, but was surprised when he saw Jean leaning against the wall. Hey, Eren greeted. "Hey," Jean greeted. "What are you doing here?" Eren asked. "Mikasa needs rest, so I've decided to be your babysitter," Jean answered. "Like I need you of all people to babysit me," Eren grumbled. "I took turns with Connie and Sasha," Jean added. "I'd hate to stay up the entire night to watch you." "Ha," Eren drawled out. "Well, hurry up," Jean said as he walked down the hall. "We have a meeting." Optimus merely stood by the door as he watched the meeting unfold. He saw Historia sitting next to Darius Zackley and someone else whilst the others branches of military were seated all around. Erwin was the only one absent because of his outburst today, specifically directed at him. Levi knocked him out and locked him in a room to prevent further damage. Meanwhile Megatron witnessed the entire situation and laughed at the entire scenario. Hanji decided to take his place in the meeting to convey the material. The Prime then thought about the information presented regarding the outside. The world became more complicated. Titans were no longer the enemy. Humans were. And even though he and Megatron didn't consume humans, they would be labeled as the enemy because they were considered Titans. They also sided with the humans that they despised so much. But was this even a winnable situation? The world wants them gone. Wiped off the face of the earth. Once they got their hands on Eren, what would stop the Mali Empire from wiping out the island and the Eldians in the internment zones? Optimus would try to advocate for a peaceful solution, but in this scenario it seemed impossible. Now he would have to fight the very species he swore to protect. The question was, could he really go against his moral code? Optimus jolted as Eren shot up to his feet, almost as if he came to a sudden conclusion. When asked about it however, Eren merely sat down and looked scared. He then noticed that all the other Survey Corps members looked tired from hearing the information. Optimus Prime, Zackley spoke as he turned his attention to him. It was mentioned that one of the Titan shifters has your life force in her veins. Do you have any idea of what that could mean? In all honesty, I do not know, Optimus admitted. Organic life usually has a negative reaction when exposed to energon. The fact that Annie Leonhardt is still alive with the substance in her systems already worries me. And the possible enhancement she may have gained may prove to be dangerous. Despite Megatron beating the female Titan in combat, she still managed to cause damage to his form. Hanji continued, if Marley does manage to replicate this power, it would be extremely dangerous for the island. The only other possible person that might know the secret to this would be Kenny Ackerman. But it seems he's been withdrawing information. But what do we do about the information about the outside? A soldier asked. If we release this information to the public, it would cause chaos. Do you truly believe withholding the information would be wise to do? Pixis asked. That would be committing the same act King Fritz did a century ago. There are others who still have misgivings about Historia, another soldier retorted. This may give more people a reason to go against her. But we told the public we would retrieve the information, Pixies countered. They are demanding an answer. We must release this information, Optimus declared, earning everyone's attention. Do you really believe we should? Zackley asked. There are some issues with releasing the notebooks that we should take into consideration. I understand, Optimus agreed, but that information may not matter at the end of the day. Keeping the public in a state of ignorance will not prevent the enemy from coming onto the shore and killing everyone here. It will only leave the island more unprepared for the future. Marley and the rest of the world want us gone. We must be prepared for that day in order to preserve our future. United we shall stand, but divided we will fall. There was silence in the room before Historia spoke. We will release the information. Optimus is right. We must be united against this threat. King Fritz stole the memories of the people a century ago. We are merely returning them. Megatron stood on top of the wall and watched the sun set. He noticed humans looking up at him in fear and awe, but he didn't pay any mind to it. Megatron! Hanji shouted as she used her 3D gear to reach the top of the wall. Can you do me a favor? Megatron sighed in irritation as he sat on the wall, mindful of where Hanji was. He glanced down at her before begrudgingly offering his servo. Hanji contained her excitement as she jumped into his servo before he lifted her up to his face. What is it? Megatron demanded. We were wondering if you could check something out really quickly, Hanji began as she flipped through one of Grisha's notebooks. According to Grisha, just south of the island, there's a port where the Marley drop off the Eldians and force them to become Titans. I also asked Ma and she stated that it was the case. I was wondering if you could check it out and report back to Optimus once you get there. And I already told him about the situation, so you should be good to go. If you're willing. Where are you even keeping the other shifter? Megatron questioned with curiosity. We didn't place her in a holding cell because she isn't really trying to escape, Hanji explained. She says she doesn't want to fight you. Understandable, Megatron said before placing Hanji down on the wall and stood up. Thank you so much for doing this, Hanji said. Megatron merely grunted in response as he transformed and flew south. Eren, may we talk? Optimus asked as he approached the Titan shifter in the hallway with his hollow form on. Eren didn't say a word as the Titan kneeled down in front of him. He was just trying to get to his room without incident. He didn't want to talk to Optimus right now. The Titan shifter hesitantly forced himself to look Optimus in the eye. I just wanted to know if you are all right, Optimus explained. I understand what we have learned may be difficult to digest, but I just wanted to know how you are feeling about it. Eren sighed to himself as he tried not to snap at the Prime. He was only trying to help. Angry, confused, a little upset. And you have every right to be, Optimus reassured as he placed a hand on his shoulder, but rest assured, we will find a solution to this madness. Will we? Eren questioned. This just seems like an impossible situation. I understand, Optimus said, but we should not give up hope just yet. We will find a way to end this curse and... Stop, Eren interrupted, please. Just stop. Eren? Optimus questioned. Eren merely shook his head. Remember that promise you made to me? When you said you would come with me, Mikasa, and Armin to see the world. I want you to forget all about it, and forget all about me. This is in the honor shots. All of them are on Wattpad. Why would you say that? Optimus asked. Because I'm a dead man walking, okay? Eren exclaimed as he pushed Optimus' hand off of his shoulder. I only have 8 years left to live. Meanwhile you have another 4 million. And even if my lifespan wasn't shortened, us humans are only lucky enough to reach a century. I'm just going to turn to dust while you continue to live on. Eren hung his head as he took a step back. Just forget about me. Optimus watched in heartbreak as Eren ran away from him. The Prime was about to give chase, but his link turned on. Optimus, I've reached port the mad scientist mentioned, Megatron informed. Optimus didn't respond immediately, afraid whatever might come out of his mouth would be a broken sound of agony. Optimus, I need you to respond, Megatron said. Optimus? The Prime took a deep breath to calm his nerves and spoke. I read you. I'm facing the wall right now the humans used to separate themselves from the Titans they drop here on the island, Megatron explained. The other side is the ocean. I saw it before I landed in front of the wall. I'll come back to you right. Destroy it, Optimus ordered. Excuse you? Megatron questioned. Destroy the wall, Optimus repeated, almost letting his emotions take over. Destroy the port if you must. Make sure that Marley is unable to land a ship on these shores and use it to turn humans into Titans. Annie, Bertolt, and Raina stood in shame in front of their commanding officer as they were riding a metal ship back to Marley with other members of the Marley military. The three immediately took to the port, using Annie in her Titan form. Thankfully the ship didn't dock later into the night and arrived at sunset. It just made it easier to leave the island as soon as possible. They made sure to take the broken thorn of the flying Titan with them as proof, but that didn't stop them from getting chewed out by Commander Magath. They had forgotten the dirty looks and slurs they heard because they've on the island for so long, but now it was only worse, since they failed their mission of retaking the founding Titan. The crew looked at the three of them with so much hatred. 5 years, Commander Magath began, you've been on this island for 5 years, and have yielded no results. Not only did you fail to retake the founding Titan, but you have also managed to lose the Jaws Titan in the process. But sir, I will not hear an excuse, warrior. Magath shouted at Raina, the only thing you've managed to bring back was an unidentifiable mineral. A hunk of metal. This practically means nothing, especially if this is a resource that is only found on Paradis. We failed our mission, Annie accepted, but we weren't prepared for what was on that island. They have Titans that come from beyond the stars. They stopped Bertolt's healing factor. Titans from the stars? A Marleyan soldier said, causing the others to laugh at the absurdity of the idea. You have no say in the matter, Magath declared. Making excuse after excuse will not save you. Neither will bringing that. The three saw Magath point to the piece that Annie managed to chop off. They noticed the other soldiers keeping their distance from the metal, since they were unfamiliar with the mineral. So unless you three can provide solid evidence of this Titan's existence, I will revoke your Titan abilities and hand them over to the next batch of warriors. Magath threatened. Commander Magath. A soldier cried out. What is it? Magath demanded as he walked to the man. The wall. The soldier exclaimed as he pointed to the wall. Magath watched the wall on the port begin to shake, as cracks began to form. The commander watched in horror as a fist punched a clean hole in the wall. When the being retracted his fist, the whole wall came crashing down. Magath and other soldiers watched as a great Titan stood up fully and stepped over the wreckage it caused. Magath noticed the intricate features on the Titan, the spikes, the rusted ends, the purple markings, the haunting red eyes, and the missing thorn on his left shoulder. The one that was on their ship right now. What kind of Titan is that? A soldier asked. The crew heard a scream behind them and turned to see their Titan warriors panicking in fear. Bertolt clutched his damaged hand and looked ready to vomit. Raina clutched his chest and his throat, almost as if there was a wound there. Annie was the most terrified out of the three. The mostly reserved girl was outright sobbing as she covered her mouth to prevent anything else from coming out. She collapsed on the floor and curled in on herself, almost as if she was trying to disappear. Magath looked back at the Titan, and saw that it was looking at their ship with a calculating stare. Magath gasped as the Titan removed something from his waist and did something that caused the object to shift into a full-length sword. "What the hell?" one of them shouted. "Commander, your orders," a soldier next to him said. "Don't," Rainer shouted as he grabbed Magath by the arm and got down on his knees. "Please don't. He'll kill us. If we attack it, he'll see it as an excuse to kill us." Magath was about to tell the Eldian to let him go, but saw that Rainer was beginning to cry as well. He pulled his hand away and turned back to the Titan and noticed that he was still staring back at them, unmoving. What was it doing? Why was it just standing there? Everyone watched the Titan raise its blade into the air, before swinging it into the water. The crew watched in horror as the blade destroyed 2 of the docks. The Titan personally stepped and crushed the 3rd one, not caring if it got its foot in the water. The Titan then threw his blade into the left side of the undamaged wall, piercing it and causing it to crumble in response. The Titan then used his claws to bring down the other side of the wall. The crew watched as chunks of debris fell into the sea while the Titan stomped on what remained. The Titan then raised its fists into the air and slammed them down hard onto the port floor. Cracks formed as the port floor shattered under its action. Pieces of the port floor fell into the water, and said water rippled in response. Magath could have sworn he felt the attack, even though the ship was a good distance away from the Titan. "The Titan is sentient?" a soldier asked in shock. "The devils have a sentient Titan." "That thing looks like a devil," another one commented. "Is that the devil of all Earth?" the third questioned in horror. Magath watched as the Titan picked up his sword and caused it to transform back to its original state. He then looked out to their ship once more, and Magath could have sworn he saw the Titan smirk at them. Magath could only watch as the Titan mockingly bowed in front of them. He was taunting them. He knew he had an audience, and he taunted them. The Titan turned its back on them, and before Magath could bark out in order to attack it, the Titan jumped into the air, shifted its entire body into a strange object, and flew north towards the wall at high speeds. What the hell? The island devils grew in numbers. What do we do? A sentient Titan just flew? Was that an Eldian? They must have created the Titan. That has to be an Eldian. Quiet! Magath shouted, causing the entire crew to shut up. The commander walked over to Raina and grabbed him by the shirt. "You will explain exactly who that Titan is," Magath ordered, "if you want to live for however many years you have left." Later that night, Optimus closed his optics and tried to rest in his bipedal mode, leaning against wall Cena to support his back. He opened his tired optics to see Megatron walking up to him and handing him a piece of energon. "I do not need it," Optimus said. "Sweet yourself," Megatron responded, leaning against the wall and taking a bite out of the shard. "Chewing energon is more strenuous than it needs to be." "Megatron, all I want is some rest," Optimus immediately proclaimed. "I doubt that you're tired," Megatron proclaimed. "I am," Optimus retorted. Megatron merely hummed in response. "I bet you were satisfied that I destroyed that port." Optimus glared at Megatron and quickly stood up. "Do not say such ridiculous statements." "Ridiculous? Do you honestly believe I didn't notice your distress over the link?" Megatron rhetorically asked, placing his servos on his servos. "You're upset, and I having trouble analyzing the situation about human not being extinct." "I have already accepted that," Optimus declared. "I know you're also upset about your pet," Megatron added. "He is not a pet," Optimus warned. "He is a child." "He's also a fool," Megatron declared. The ex-con didn't flinch as Optimus aimed his gun at his face. "Choose your next words carefully," Optimus warned. "I am not going to take them back," Megatron proclaimed. "You are too attached to this boy. You are too attached to humans. He would have been lucky if he reached a century before he died, even if he didn't have that curse over his head. You knew the consequences, so why are you still upset? Optimus closed his optics and sighed, lowering his gun and transforming it back into his servo. That is not the issue. I am fully aware of the human lifespan and how it pales in comparison to ours. I knew that when I stayed on Earth and I became stranded on this world. I am fully ready to accept that. That does not make it right. Optimus turned away from Megatron to prevent the ex-con from seeing his face. That does not make it right, that a father would put such a burden on his child, and take away the rest of his life. Megatron's claws twitched as he moved his servo to rest them on the Prime's shoulder, but he hesitated as he was mere inches from him. Please, Megatron, Optimus pleaded, just let me rest. Megatron watched as Optimus transformed into his alt mode and drove away from him. The ex-con clenched his fists and realized that the boy must have said something. Optimus wouldn't be like this if his pet didn't say anything. First Mikasa, then Armin, and now Optimus. He shouldn't care about any of them, but slag it, he does. And now, he was going to make sure to kill that brat. Eren sat down on one of the crates in the supply room away from everyone else. He went to his room after running away from Optimus, and when he wanted to leave later, he managed to get the slip on whoever was at the front door. Connie was guarding it, but he was also sleeping. He hated everything, and he just wanted to disappear. There was no end to his nightmare. Eren stiffened when he heard the door to the supply room open. He glanced up to see Megatron's hollow form, seemingly tired for wear, looking at the Titan shifter with such hatred it would have made the military police shit their pants. I am going to rip off your head, Megatron threatened. Then maybe you should have let me die that night, Eren shot back. Eren jolted as the ex-con slammed the door shut and stomped towards him. You better choose your next words carefully, Megatron warned. Where's your weapon? Eren stared up at the ex-con with an innocent look on his face. What weapon? Megatron growled and grabbed Eren's leg, causing the boy to nearly lose his balance on the crate. What the hell are you doing, you? Eren nearly cursed as Megatron lifted his pant leg to reveal a knife in his shoe that he managed to grab from the kitchen. Megatron pulled on Eren's leg, causing him to fall to the floor. He then took the knife and snapped it in two before throwing the blade into the wall. Eren clutched his head in pain from the impact. He then felt the air in his lungs forced out of his as Megatron stepped on his chest. The former warlord kneeled down to look the child directly in the eye. I did not save your life just so you can throw it away and cause others misery, Megatron proclaimed. No, Eren retorted. You did it so you could get on Optimus' good side. Megatron let his anger take over and began to choke Eren. Maybe you were right. Maybe I should have let that bullet pierce your skull. Megatron stopped when he noticed Eren's small smile of contentment, despite the fact he was trying to kill him. Unless Eren wanted Megatron to kill him. The ex-con took a deep breath to calm his nerves and removed his hand from Eren's throat and took his foot off of Eren's chest. Megatron noticed as Eren rubbed his throat, that he was looking up at the ex-con in disappointment. Not anger. You're more pathetic than I thought, Megatron remarked. And you're more childish than I thought, Eren shot back. Megatron gritted his teeth. He knew Eren was trying to anger him enough to kill him, but he knew he shouldn't give in. No matter how tempting it was. I'm not going to deal with this, Megatron declared as he walked away from Eren. I'm getting your comrades. Wait. Please don't. Eren begged as he shot up. You want me to kill you, Megatron stated. I am not dealing with that nonsense because I already hate you. I would rather get someone who can deal with your self-loathing. You don't understand. I can't put them through that, Eren declared. Megatron stopped in his tracks and looked back at Eren. Explain. Eren trailed off, you already know how worthless I am. And now I only have 8 years left to live. The promises I've made with Mikasa and Armin. The dreams about seeing the ocean and all the other places in the world, it's all pointless. I'm just going to hurt them when I die. Eren fell to his knees and curled in on himself. Just please don't let me die alone. It's better for everyone. Megatron watched with an unreadable expression at the boy's pathetic actions. He couldn't deal with this. He wasn't right to deal with this. But the others were in too much distress to try. Mikasa's sorrow, Armin's anguish, Optimus' silence. If Eren was truly blind to see the sorrow he was causing by distancing himself, then he really was a fool. The problem was getting Eren to see that. He needed to reignite his will to live. I hate you to no end, Megatron declared. Before Eren could respond, Megatron grabbed Eren's arm, pulled him to his feet before dragging him out of the stable. Eren should have fought back. He should have said something, but maybe Megatron might finally end his life. Optimus, I'm resting outside the wall. I need time to myself. Megatron reported to Optimus before pushing Eren forward and deactivating his hollow form. Eren stumbled forward and noticed gray feet in front of him before he was picked up by the ex-con. Eren closed his eyes as Megatron transformed into his jet mode with Eren in the cockpit. Eren opened his eyes and gripped whatever he could as Megatron flew north. Where are you taking me? Eren demanded. Somewhere, Megatron merely answered. Are you going to kill me? I'm not granting you that wish. No matter how many times you anger me. Eren gasped as Megatron transformed into his bipedal mode and held him in his hand before dropping him. Eren expected to hit the ground, but gasped when he fell into water. Eren choked on the water as he managed to sit up and realized the water tasted like salt. Eren stood up with his soaking, wet clothes as the full moon revealed that he was at the ocean. Eren questioned in shock as Megatron sat down. Why would you bring me here? You humans have never been outside of these walls, Megatron answered as he crossed his legs. Eren stomped out of the water and trudged through the heavy sand before angrily throwing off his shoes. You bastard! Eren yelled, I was supposed to see this with Armin and Mikasa. Really? Because I thought you wanted them to forget all about you, Megatron shot back. Eren growled as he walked away from the ocean, but was stopped when Megatron grabbed him by his shirt and threw him forward into the sand. Eren grunted in disgust as he began to spit out sand from his mouth. Where do you think you're going? Megatron demanded. Back to the wall, Eren answered as he stood up. No you're not, Megatron declared. And what exactly are you going to do about it? Eren challenged. Eren jolted as Megatron's claws sunk into the sand, mere inches away from his face. Eren looked up at the ex-con who was clearly unamused by Eren's antics. Sit, Megatron ordered. Eren grumbled in response as he sat down on the sand. Why do you bring me here? Because leaving you by yourself is more destructive for you, Megatron explained, and for some reason, leaving you with someone else hurts them. Like you would care, you monster, Eren hissed at him. There's an entire continent that would say the same thing to you, Megatron countered, villain, monster, titan, filth. Every name you call me, they call you out there. Congratulations, brat, you're the bad guy in this story. You think I don't know that? Eren shot back. I've been seeing memories from my father. I know exactly what's been going on. Yet you look at the world with a narrow mind, which is why you're having such a difficult time accepting the reality in front of you, Megatron declared. You still look at me with contempt and hatred because of what you have heard. You never questioned how it came to be. You still refuse to understand the other side of the story. I bet you don't even understand us humans, Eren proclaimed. I've been walking among you for the past month and observing how you behave, Megatron retorted. Oh yeah? And what conclusion could you have possibly come up with for us? Eren demanded. Megatron didn't respond, making Eren believe he won the conversation. There was no way Megatron saw something good in humanity. I see, Megatron began. A race with courage that could rival that of a Cybertronian. Despite your species' shortcomings. Eren turned to look at Megatron's stoic face as he stared out into the sea. For some reason, he could tell he wasn't lying. Even if that shortcoming is my lifespan? Eren questioned as he turned away from him. You still have time, Megatron said. 8 years is not a lot of time, Eren retorted, not compared to 4 million years. Megatron chuckled at his response. And yet, I have wasted my time. Eren glanced back to see the ex-con took a handful of sand and brought it to his face. 4 million years of energon spilled and endless fighting. A fight that lasted so long, we had forgotten what the purpose was. We had forgotten what peace even looked like, or felt like. And when I look back on my life, I realized I have tarnished my name. Eren watched as Megatron opened his hand to let the sand blow into the wind. And wasted my time. But you're still alive, Eren retorted. With a damaged spark and a world that would want me executed the moment I step foot on the planet once more, Megatron retorted. It doesn't matter if you have all the time in the universe, boy. It matters what you choose to do, and who you choose to be. But what's the point? Eren questioned, all the suffering, all the madness. It's just too much to deal with. I never said it would be easy, Megatron reminded, reality is never that easy. And ending your life may seem like the easy way out, but it is not. Have you thought about that? Eren asked. Megatron sighed as he rested his arm on his knee. Before I arrived here, I was alone. No comrades, no enemies or friends. I thought about doing so. Why didn't you? Eren asked. Because it was the coward's way out, Megatron answered. Throwing my life away wouldn't have solved anything for me. So I continued to move forward, regardless of what I was feeling. But didn't you lose everything? Eren retorted. So why? Maybe because it was a duty to correct my wrongdoings, Megatron answered. Maybe it's because I still have a will to live. I just know that if I ended my life then, I wouldn't have found Optimus here. I continued onward, and I suppose I found a will to live. Eren didn't say a word as he looked back at the ocean. It was so strange to see Megatron act like this. It was strange to see him be honest and truthful. He continued to move forward despite having nothing, so then why shouldn't he? Eren was so caught up with his thoughts and fatigue he didn't realize he fell asleep. Eren jolted awake when he felt something sharp poke his back. He wiped the sand off of his face and looked up to see Megatron standing up. It's morning, Megatron stated. I need to take you back before someone realizes you're gone. Eren stood up and was about to put on his shoes, but stopped when he noticed the sun rising over the sea. The water glistened with a bright light as he heard the waves rushing into the shore. He didn't notice this when Megatron brought him here, but now that he saw it, the sight before him was beautiful. Wait, Eren said, can I do something really quick? Megatron thought it over. You have a minute. Eren dropped his shoes back into the sand and rolled up his pant legs to prevent them from getting wet before walking towards the ocean. The Titan shifter hesitated for a moment, but decided to place his feet in the water. The sand was muddy under his feet, and the water was nice and cold. He watched as the water receded back into the ocean before rising up once more from the small waves. It apostrophes beautiful, Eren spoke as he looked out towards the horizon. I suppose, Megatron said. I always thought that beyond these waters was freedom, Eren continued, but now I know that there is an enemy out there. The entire world that wants us gone. Megatron, can you tell me, is there any possible way to achieve freedom? If we defeat the enemy, will we finally be free? Megatron didn't respond as he thought about his answer. I do believe so. But it will be a long and difficult task, with much sacrifice and loss. If you're willing to continue onward despite what lies ahead. Megatron remembered the sun rising on a reborn Cybertron before he left his planet. You will finally be free. Where's Irene? Armin and Mikasa demanded at Connie, Sasha, and Jean outside of the castle in Walsena. We don't know, because Connie was sleeping on the job. Jean shouted. I got tired, Connie retorted. You should have called one of us. Jean proclaimed. Damn it, we got to go looking for him. Sasha exclaimed. You better hope you find him or one of your heads is going to end up on my sword, Mikasa threatened. Armin gasped as he saw Irene walking up to them with his shoes in hand, his pant legs rolled up, and dirt all over his body. Irene! Armin exclaimed as he ran to him, prompting the others to follow. Irene was about to wave hello, but he grunted as Armin and Mikasa tackled him to the floor. Guys, wait, let me breathe, Irene requested as he sat up. Irene, where have you been? Mikasa demanded. We've been worried sick. Armin exclaimed. Guys, wait. Irene shouted, getting them both to be quiet. I am sorry. I'm so sorry for the way I've been acting. And I know I'm a mess and I know I only have 8 years left but... Irene that. Please, Irene interrupted, let me just... I still am a mess, and I still need time. But I would really like to see the ocean with you guys. His two friends could only stare at Irene before the tears began to fall. Armin and Mikasa hugged Irene and the Titan shifter willingly hugged them back with a smile on his face. Meanwhile, Optimus watched from a distance as Irene got to his feet to greet his other comrades. Optimus stilled as he felt a servo on his shoulder and turned to see Megatron standing behind him. Megatron, did you? I did what I could, Megatron said as he awkwardly patted his shoulder before removing it. Optimus gave a small smile before looking up towards the sky. The information regarding the outside has been released to the public. Which means there's no going back, Megatron concluded as he looked up towards the sky as well. This is the beginning. Optimus silently agreed with Megatron. This was definitely the beginning of a new age. And now... there was no going back. Chapter 26. Thea Magath took a deep breath in irritation, rubbing his temple and leaning forward on his desk. He tapped his foot in the communications room on the ship that went to Paradis. He found the table less interesting and lifted his eyes to see the 3 remaining warriors sitting in front of them. He could tell they were still shaken by the flying Titan destroying the port, but for some reason he could tell that it was more than that. So, Magath began, there are 2 metal Titans. They both come from a world far beyond and more advanced than our own. The 3 nodded their heads. One of them is named Optimus Prime, Magath continued, but you have no idea what the name of the flying Titan is. No, Rainer answered, it never came up in combat. I was never able to hear it during a conversation either, Bertolt admitted before looking down at his hand, not after what he did to me. Magath nodded his head before turning attention to Annie. What about you? Did you hear his name? Annie shook her head. The only thing that I know is that Optimus gave him the option to leave. So they both have a sense of free will, Magath surmised, and he stole the Jaws Titan? Rainer nodded. He took Marcel. He must have saw him as the weakest Titan and took him. They also made me tell them about transferring the powers of a Titan, Bertolt added, so they most likely found a way to feed him to someone else. Magath took a deep breath and sighed. This is much more complicated than we anticipated. Once we arrive in Mali, you will explain the situation to the commanders there. For now, you all must rest. By dawn, we should be back in Mali. Magath watched as all 3 of them walked out of the room and below the deck to rest. Magath got up from his chair and walked over to the window, staring out into the ocean. He knew that sending the 4 of them to the island was a bad idea. Now, Marcel is most likely dead, and the remaining 3 warriors were completely traumatized by the event. He shouldn't have yelled at them like he did, but he didn't believe the threat was real until he saw it with his own eyes. Magath curled his hands into a fist. The flying titan bowed. It mocked them all by bowing after it destroyed the port. He could only imagine what that thing did to the warriors. And the other titan. He hasn't seen it, but he has no doubt that it is real. The flying titan and this Optimus Prime were most likely the most powerful titans in all of existence, and they just happened to fall into the hands of the demons of Paradise Island. Raina saw that Annie was finally able to get some sleep before closing the door to her room. He walked down the hall of the bottom deck of the ship and opened the door to his and Bertolt's shared room. Raina sighed as he sat down on his bed, seeing that Bertolt was across the room with his back faced towards him. Raina was about to lie down, but stopped when Bertolt spoke. "How long are we going to lie about Marcel?" Bertolt asked. Raina hesitated for a moment. "We can't tell the truth about him. We have to take it to our graves." "We shouldn't have lied about his death," Bertolt declared. "And what do you think we should do?" Raina demanded. "Tell them we lost Marcel before we even reached the wall? They'll have our heads and revoke our power." "And what happens when they do find out the truth?" Bertolt shot back. "They'll have our heads and turn everyone we love into titans as punishment." "The story we made up will check out," Raina reassured. "What about Porco?" Bertolt demanded. "He's not going to buy it for a second." "He will," Raina proclaimed. "He hates you," Bertolt reminded as he turned to face him. "He's going to blame you for Marcel's death." "Then let him," Raina said. "I already feel enough guilt for his death, but we have to maintain the lie." Bertolt stared at Raina before turning away. "What will you do if they do find out?" "Take responsibility," Raina answered. "You two suffered enough because of me. It would only make sense if I paid you back by taking the blame and dragging you further into this." "Raina," Bertolt trailed off. "Get some rest," Raina roared as he slumped onto the bed and pulled the covers over him. Bertolt merely grimaced as he covered his hand. Lying about Marcel, it might have been something they all agreed to, but it was really all just a ploy to save Raina's skin for his incompetency. And it seemed he was willing to throw him and Annie under the boat if he wished to survive. He was beginning to think that Raina was a weak and selfish person. Annie struggled for a moment before opening her eyes and looking down in horror. She screamed and backed away as she saw Marco's half-eaten corpse crawling to her. "Why?" he said weakly. "It was a misunderstanding. Why did you leave me to die?" Annie wasn't able to run fast enough as Marco crawled faster towards her. "You should rot, you bitch!" Marco shouted as blood came from the wound. "Rot! Rot! Rot!" Annie gasped and screamed as she fell backwards into an endless abyss. When she landed, she found herself in her Titan form. Before she could process what was going on, she felt a shadow loom over her. She looked up and saw Optimus Prime raising his blade. She rolled out of the way as the blade pierced the ground, causing her to run away from the Prime. She didn't know where she was running, but she kept on going. "Fall," she heard Optimus say. Annie was pushed forward by a shot fired from the Prime's cannon. She landed on her front and skidded across the ground. She pushed herself onto her knees and saw two familiar feet standing in front of her. She raised her head and made eye contact with the flying Titan. She saw the bastard smile wickedly at her before lifting his hand to reveal her father in his clutches. Her father tried to get a word out, but the Titan crushed in his hand before he could. Annie watched in horror as the flying Titan let the carcass carelessly slip from his hand to the ground. She trembled as she reached for the carcass and held the mess of blood, bone, and guts in her hands. "I told you I would come after your father," the flying Titan declared as he removed bits of the man from his fingers. Annie began to cry before she let out a high-pitched scream of despair. Annie screamed as she was kicking the sheets covering her body. Her eyes snapped open and she shot straight, but she then fell out of the bed due to her panicked state. She kicked the blankets that came down with her and tried to calm herself down. She wiped the sweat and tears coming down her face before forcing herself to stand up. She felt like she was going to throw up, but forced herself to keep the bile in her systems. She looked out the single window on the single window in her room and saw that it was almost morning. They were almost in Mali, but the guilt and shame she was expecting to face, she didn't want to go back at all. A teenage boy with ginger hair wearing the standard warrior uniform stood impatiently on the dock next to two others. He tapped his foot impatiently and crossed his arms. The girl with black hair to his left, wearing a skirt and holding a set of crutches, looked up at him and raised an eyebrow. "Porco, why are you so impatient?" she asked. "I'm not impatient, I'm irritated," Porco corrected. "Why do we have to stay out here? We don't even know if they're coming back today." "They might," she retorted, "and you'll get to see Marcel again." They stayed on the island for over 5 years, the third man reminded the two of them. He was the tallest out of the three, with blonde hair and a short beard. He adjusted his glasses before looking down at both of them. The fact that they stayed so long must have meant there was a complication. Most likely the metal titan. The girl giggled. "The higher-ups are still having trouble believing what you said, Zeke, even though you're one of the most loyal Eldians ever. If the others have seen it too and gathered information on it, Pike, then they will have to believe the threat on Paradis," Zeke declared. Porco tensed when he saw the ship come into view. He had done this multiple times to see if his brother had returned, but nothing happened every time. He felt he was wasting his time, but he hoped that his brother would return along with the founding Titan. The ship docked at the port and Porco waited with bated breath as the soldiers got off the ship. The first thing he noticed was a guilty, older, version of Raina walking onto the port. He then saw Bertolt and Annie following suit, looking more so scared than guilty. But the one thing Porco noticed was no sign of his brother. Pike smiled as she did her best to run over to the three due to her crutches. "You're back. Welcome home." Pike hugged Annie first, even though she was extremely tense when she made contact with her. She then moved over to Bertolt and hugged him. The now tall warrior seemed to force a smile as he used his right arm to hug her. Zeke noticed Bertolt's left hand looked burned and was surprised to see that Bertolt was missing a finger. He also glanced at Annie and noticed her eyes were a lighter shade of blue. Pike moved over to Raina, but noticed the Titan shifter slightly move away from her, causing her to grow concerned. "Raina, what's wrong?" she asked, but he chose not to answer. "Where's Marcel?" Porco demanded as he stepped to the three of them. "Where the hell is my brother?" None of them answered, causing Porco to conclude the worst. "No," Porco trailed off, "no, no, no. Marcel, he's on the ship. He's trying to play a sick prank on me. After 5 years, why would he do that? That's so cruel." "Porco," Raina spoke up, staring at the floor. "Marcel. He." Porco stared at Raina as his denial soon turned to anger. He screamed as he tried to tackle Raina, but Zeke and Bertolt held him back while Annie got in front of Raina to protect him. "Porco, enough," Zeke ordered. "I knew it," Porco shouted. "You were the weakest out of us. You were the runt and they made you a Titan shifter. Damn you, Raina. Damn you. You got my brother killed." "It wasn't his fault," Annie retorted. "We barely managed to escape with our lives. The flying Titan was able to capture Marcel. There was nothing we could do." Porco stopped kicking as Zeke and Pike turned their attention to Annie. "Annie, what are you talking about?" Pike questioned. "Titans can't fly." "This one did," Bertolt reasoned. "He managed to beat us all by himself in combat. And Optimus Prime is just as strong as him." "Optimus Prime?" Zeke questioned. "Is that the name of the metal Titan?" Porco snapped his head to Bertolt as the Titan shifter nodded his head. Before they could question them any further, They all saw Malian soldiers hesitantly transport a large, rusted, grey, metal thorn off the ship. Many looked on it in fear, as some seemed to be reliving a past event that happened. "What happened on that island?" Pike asked. "We will discuss it later," Magath answered as he walked up to the six of them. "For now, we must all head to headquarters. You three will provide an explanation to your failure, and the reasons we shouldn't revoke your powers." Bertolt, Annie, and Raina grew tense as Magath walked off. They were all in extremely hot water. Meanwhile, Porker forced himself out of Zeke and Bertolt's grip, glaring at Raina before walking away as well. They all better have a good reason. Later, Annie tied her hair back and straightened out her uniform before looking at herself in the mirror. It has been so long since she's had to adorn this uniform. To be an honorary Malian, to serve her country and atone for the sins of her ancestors. She and her father knew that was nonsense from the start. They didn't fall for it like Raina and so many others did. But now that she's back from the island, now that she knew the whole truth, she hated being in this uniform. Annie sighed as she looked down at the red armband on her arm. She hated having to wear this again. Annie walked out of the changing room in headquarters and down the hall to the military war room. When she reached the door, she saw Bertolt waiting for her outside in his. "I thought you'd be inside," Annie remarked. "I decided to wait for you," Bertolt said, better than everyone else staring at us in shame. Annie noticed Bertolt gripping his armband with his right hand before her eyes trailed down to his injured left. "How's the hand?" Annie asked. "Nothing yet, and I hope nothing happens again," Bertolt answered before he opened the door. The two Titan shifters stepped in the room to see five high-ranking commanding officers seated at the far end of the table where a large window was placed, Commander Magath included. Zeke was seated next to Magath on the right side of the table while Pike was seated on the left next to another commander. Raina sat next to Zeke, wanting to stay as far away from Porco as possible, who was sitting next to Pike. Porco silently glared at Raina, forcing the Titan shifter to keep his head down. Bertolt decided to walk over and sit next to Raina while Annie sat next to Porco. Bertolt, Annie, and Raina held their breath, as Commander Calvi took a deep breath and stood. "You four have been on that island for 5 years, Calvi began. "Well, now 3. Ever since you left, we've had to expand our resources to accommodate for the absence of our military might. That still wasn't enough for tensions to rise between other nations and cause war. Now 3 of you remain. And if we release a statement regarding your failure of retrieving the founding Titan and the lose of the Jaws, it could mean war. Because, if an island with a lack of technology managed to defeat one of our most powerful weapons, what is to stop other countries from trying to trample us into the ground?" The trio tensed as Calvi stood up from his chair. "So you 3 better give us all a good explanation as to why you all failed, and why we shouldn't revoke your powers," Calvi declared. Raina noticed all eyes on them. He saw Pike staring at them with a concerned look while Porco was waiting for an explanation. "We infiltrated the walls by destroying the entrances to Wall Maria, making it easier for us to slip in," Raina explained. "We infiltrated the military and gathered as much information regarding the king as possible in order to retake the coordinate. We planned to destroy the gates to Wall Rose, but we weren't expecting what came next. We found another Titan shifter, Eren Yeager, who we later discovered had the powers of the coordinate. But now we believe that there is a Titan even stronger than the coordinate. He's a metal Titan called Optimus Prime." "Optimus Prime," Calvi said, "you expect me to believe the Devils managed to create a metal mindless Titan?" "The Titan is sentient, sir," Bertolt explained. "It displays advanced amounts of intelligence. It knows how to speak and it knows how to fight. When we tried to break through Wall Rose, it managed to kill over 100 Titans." Bertolt's comment piqued everyone's interest now. Their faces of anger turned into one of slight interest. How did the Titan manage to kill over 100 Titans? Calvi demanded. He was able to alter his body, Bertolt continued. He could turn his hands into guns and swords while changing his body into a vehicle faster than most of Mali's artillery. According to the information that we gathered, Rainer continued, he's a war veteran, and he's from another world far more advanced than our own. Another world? One of the commanders said. There's life outside of our world? Another one questioned in shock. That's impossible, Magath retorted. That is what we gathered, Rainer merely stated. Then how did he manage to come to this world? Calvi asked. We don't know, Rainer answered, but the Titan stated that his race is extremely advanced. They've managed to create a device that could transport anyone anywhere in a matter of seconds. He might have used something like that. In this world? Calvi asked. Even beyond it, Rainer answered. That's a pretty detailed lie that you've managed to come up with, Porco hissed. Silence, warrior, Magath ordered, causing Porco to shut his mouth. It is not a lie, Zeke defended Rainer, causing everyone to look at him. Zeke, you've reported that you've encountered a metal titan that you were unable to control, Calvi recalled. Is this the same titan they speak of right now? Was the titan red and blue? Zeke asked the three. They all nodded their heads and Zeke looked back at Calvi. Then yes, it is. How do you know? Annie asked Zeke. I fought him when I came to the island, Zeke explained. I tried to see if I could control him and give him commands, but he continued to fight me. He nearly ended my life and almost crushed me when I was in the nape of the neck. That really happened, Zeke? Porco asked him. Yes, Zeke nodded his head. I managed to escape with my life because he became distracted. Did any of you engage this titan in combat? Calvi asked the three. I did, Annie answered. I tried to retrieve the coordinate, but he stopped me twice, and he shot off my arm. That prevented me from being able to regenerate it for a few weeks. How? Magath questioned. Apparently their blood is toxic to humans, Rainer explained. That same blood is also used to power their weapons. But when the Titan fired at me, it seemed he didn't know the effect of what it would do to my actual body, Annie concluded. So why has your arm regenerated, if it was blown off by the metal Titan? Calvi asked. The King of the Walls did something to me, Annie explained as she rolled the sleeve of her right arm. He somehow managed to mix the Titan's spinal fluid with their life force. Once they injected it into me, my arm grew back. And I've been able to regenerate instantly. Annie showed the blue veins in her arm to everyone, taking them all off guard. The warriors were startled by the revelation, while the commanders were completely disgusted. Have you had any other complications with this? Magath asked. Annie shook her head. I've been completely fine, and I also think I got stronger. But it still wasn't enough. Without it, I was still beaten by Optimus Prime. And the Titan has been training the coordinate, Eren Yeager. So when I tried to capture him, he was able to hold his own long enough for the metal Titan to capture me. I wasn't able to penetrate his armor or find any weaknesses to exploit. Porco noticed that Bertolt looked rather sick, but didn't say anything, expecting it to be related to the situation they were in right now. This Titan believes in the same lie that was told to the devils on the island, Rainer explained. He believes that humanity is extinct, but I doubt they believe that anymore. And why so? Calvi demanded. Have you devils alerted them of our presence? No, sir, Rainer answered. I believe that would be on my end, Zeke explained. Eren Yeager's father is also mine, Grisha Yeager. He was sent to the island after I exposed the Elder Restorationists. It seems that he managed to reach the walls and find a way to give the information to them. How would he have reached the island? Calvi demanded. The only way he would have been able to was if he had the powers of the Titans. He must have, Zeke concluded there was someone feeding information to the restorationists, and they infiltrated Mali military. They must have had multiple opportunities to retrieve a Titan power. The information was in Iren's old home in Wall Maria, Reyna continued. We tried to stop them from retrieving it and grab Iren, but the Flying Titan. Flying Titan? A commander shouted while everyone else stared in disbelief. Reyna nodded his head. The Flying Titan stopped us from doing so, and defeated us all in combat. He's the one that took Marcel. Porco stared at Reyna and noticed his tense expression. He saw Annie trying to keep her composure from the mere mention of him, while Bertolt looked like he was ready to throw up. "Do you know this Titan's name?" Calvi asked. "No," Reyna answered. "He appeared mere minutes after we revealed our true forms. He managed to beat us along with the Metal Titan. He is like the Metal Titan, and no doubt comes from the same world as him." "How can you be so sure?" Calvi demanded. The Metal Titan and the Flying Titan talked as if they knew each other. Bertolt managed to force out, and he could also shift his body as well. "Bertolt, are you okay?" Reyna whispered, earning a quiet nod from his friend. "When I also fought him, he referred to the Metal Titan by name," Annie explained, almost as if they knew each other a long time. "I also overheard that Optimus was allowing the Flying Titan to leave." "You all fought the Flying Titan?" Calvi asked. "What happened?" "He beat us," Annie grimaced. "That's not all. He taunted us. He played with our minds and held back his strength to show how powerless we were in the situation. My training meant nothing to him. I was only able to get a drop of blood while he nearly ripped me in half." Bike looked at Annie with a heartbroken expression as the other hung her head and looked ready to cry. Before Calvi could ask another question, Bertolt suddenly began coughing violently. Bertolt covered his mouth with his injured hand, which many noticed started to darken and spread. "Bertolt!" Porco exclaimed. Bertolt coughed up blood on the table, causing everyone to stand up and back away. Bertolt began seizing up as he collapsed on the ground and thrashed violently. "Bertolt!" Reyna exclaimed as Annie ran to him and kneeled down. "Get me something sharp," Annie shouted. "Are you ordering us?" "He is dying," Annie shouted, "and I know how to save him. And if you don't want to lose the colossal Titan, then get me something sharp." Porco grimaced before dashing out of the room to grab some sort of weapon. "Bertolt, stay with me," Annie yelled as she noticed Bertolt struggling to keep his eyes open as blood dripped from his mouth. Magath watched in shock as one of the powers of the Titans was dying in front of them all. The healing factor wasn't working and he was throwing up blood. Even though he still had 8 years left to live, he looked like he only had 2. Porco dashed back into the room holding the blade of a bayonet. "Give it here," Annie ordered. Porco gave Annie the blade before she stabbed her back through her clothes, directly into her spine. Everyone jumped back as Annie gritted her teeth in pain before taking the blade out of her back, revealing her blood to be a tainted blue with somewhat of a glow to it. She stabbed Bertolt in the chest with it, causing the Titan shifter to gasp and take a deep breath. He coughed the remainder of the blood out of his systems as his wounds began to regenerate. Everyone was still confused when his regeneration stopped at his fingers. Annie removed the blade, revealing it to now be tainted purple. Annie stared in fear before throwing the blade to the corner of the room. "Don't touch that blade," Annie ordered in a calmer voice, "that will kill you." "Take him out of the room, now," one of the commanders ordered. Annie managed to help the sluggish Bertolt to his feet and drag him out of the room with help from Porco. Calvi looked in disgust as the mess before turning his attention to Reyna. "What the hell was that? What mind game are you playing?" "There's no mind game, sir," Reyna exclaimed as he lifted his hands. "The Flying Titan. He has something more dangerous in his systems than Optimus Prime. He called the substance Dark Energon. He said it was more dangerous than Energon." We assume that would be the blood coursing through the metal titan's veins. We have no idea why the flying titan's blood is different, but he said that Bertolt's body shouldn't even remain. Then why is he still alive now? Calvi demanded. Whatever was in Annie, she thought that it would eliminate the substance from Bertolt's systems, Rainer explained. But by judging what we just witnessed, it merely stops the process of infection temporarily, Zeke concluded. This dark energon is still in his system, and can kill any one of us. Magath noticed that all the commanders looked genuinely worried while Pike stared down in genuine fear. Zeke didn't have an expression on his face, but he still looked pretty tense. Everyone looked over to see Annie open the door and walk in the room alone. Porco is going to watch over the colossal titan, sir, Annie informed. We will excuse your actions only for this moment, warrior, Calvi said, earning a submissive nod from Annie. This titan infected Bertolt with dark energon, Magath began. Did he infect any of you? No, Rainer answered. That still didn't excuse some of the actions that he did to us. When we first encountered him, he ripped out the beating heart of my titan form and crushed it between his fingers. He defeated Bertolt's titan form 3 times, ending one of the fights with a single punch and another by decapitating his head. Magath and the others now grew fearful of the actions done by the flying titan. It defeated their strongest weapons with ease, and without a moment's hesitation. Which brings the certain question. Why are you more fearful of the flying titan than Optimus Prime? Calvi asked. Because Optimus Prime is more peaceful compared to the flying titan, Rainer explained. Peaceful? A commander shouted. This titan shot off her arm. How in hell would he be considered peaceful? Before he shot off my arm the second time we fought, he offered me a chance to switch allegiance to the Island Devils. He offered to advocate for my security and even offered to train me in his fighting style. Annie explained. He is willing to offer chances for surrender and peace. He was even willing to convey basic information regarding his world, Rainer continued, and is willing to put the lives of the devils over himself. Put the lives of devils over himself? Magath questioned in disbelief. It sounds difficult, but I do believe it, Zeke agreed. I let the Titan figure out that humans could be turned into Titans, and as he attacked me in a fit of rage, he demanded that I tell him how to change them back. He believes that humanity is extinct, and I do not know what he would do once he learned of the truth of our world. What about the flying Titan? Calvi demanded. The flying Titan. He didn't care, Annie explained. He said he would give me a quick death, but he didn't even offer a chance of surrender. He said that he would kill us all and every other Titan shifter on this world. When I finally did some damage to him, it wasn't even enough as he almost ended my life. And he just toyed with me every step of the way, even though he knew I had no chance at beating him. Was there any way to discover that there was something between the metal and the flying Titan? Something we could use against them? Calvi asked. Bertolt explained that the two were conversing, almost as if they hated one another, or if there was some sort of underlying tension between them, Rainer explained before chuckling in defeat, but it didn't matter in the end what they felt towards one another. When they put their differences aside, individually they are strong, but together, they're unstoppable. You mentioned that one of them was a war veteran, Magath recalled. Yes, Rainer answered. The Metal Titan had been fighting in a war for his world and his people, and judging by the Flying Titan's fighting style and mannerism, I believe he was a part of that war too. According to him, that war is over. How long have they been fighting for? Magath asked. Rainer hesitated in answering, angering Commander Calvi. How long, warrior? 4 million years, Rainer answered. 4 million? One shouted as everyone stared at Rainer in shock and horror. That's impossible. Another shouted. It's true, Rainer said. Pike seemed to notice Zeke gripping his hands at the information, but couldn't completely focus on him because of the shocking revelation. Commander Magath, is there any way to prove their claims? Calvi demanded, that this entire story isn't made up to save their own skins? Annie gritted her teeth. Of course the officials didn't believe them. I wouldn't have believed it myself until I laid my eyes on the flying titan myself, Magath explained. He appeared to us as we left the island, but he didn't attack our ship. He destroyed the port instead. He tore it to pieces and we could only watch, but that's not the worst of it. After he finished, he looked at our ship, smirked at us, and then bowed. That bastard mocked us by bowing. So if the port is destroyed, that can only mean two things. They know of our existence based off of Grisha's information, and they've most likely found a way to eliminate the Titans on the island. Pike concluded, if these Titans are truly invincible, what is to stop them from eliminating the Titans and expanding resources? Pike, you are brilliant as always, Zeke complimented. So as at this moment, we have no way of making contact with the island and disposing of Eldian trash, Calvi hissed before taking a deep breath. If two of these Titans manage to come upon this world, then that must mean that their resources and machinery is on this world as well. But we have no way to prove that, Zeke retorted. These Titans are the proof, Calvi declared. They must have gotten here somehow, some way. If we can analyze the piece of the flying Titan you brought back with you, we can find similar minerals we can use to advance military weaponry. What if the minerals are exclusive to Paradis? Zeke asked. Then we will conduct experiments to make you all stronger, Calvi declared. If this Anagon managed to enhance Leonhardt's powers, enough to do some damage to these Titans, then we must take it into consideration. You will rest for 2 days and report to the Titan Research Facility along with Bertolt Hoover. Experiments will be conducted in order to perfect this. Annie grimaced at the thought of being experimented on once more. Yes, sir. As of this moment, all military endeavors to Paradis will cease, Calvi declared, until we can advance our artillery enough to combat these Titans, these monsters. We will not send anyone to the island at the moment. Calvi turned his attention to Rayna. I want a full detailed report of your time on the island, including the event of how exactly you lost the Jaws Titans. Your legitimacy as the armored Titan is still in the air, so you better start making a good case. Yes, sir, Rayna saluted. You are all dismissed, Calvi said. All the Titan shifters walked out of the room along with 3 of the commanders, while Calvi and Magath stayed inside. Calvi gritted his teeth as he stared out the window. How do you intend to convey this to the public? Magath demanded. Not only are there more advanced Titans, but they come from beyond this world. Something we did not consider comprehending. If we release everything to the public, there would be mass hysteria. I'm aware, but if we keep the public in the dark, the enemy will have a lead over us, Calvi retorted. We will need to work out a complete story once Braun conveys all the details, but we must advance our weaponry in the meantime. We must also be ready to prepare for the possibility of war with other countries. Once we do release this information, will they go to war with us? Or will they agree to destroy Paradis with us? I doubt there will be a positive outcome, Magath admitted. Damn. Of all the possible outcomes to this, the most powerful Titans in all of existence fall into the hands of those demons. Stopping regeneration, playing mind games, and yet they choose to stay on the island to defend those demons. They have their own sense of free will, Calvi said. They have the powers to travel beyond worlds and can live for millions of years. Are they gods? Or are they monsters? I wish to lay my eyes on one of them to see for myself. You would not, Magath admitted. The flying Titan is a monster. I think I do believe that, Calvi stated. But it is a shame that a monster can fly. This brings up more complications than it's worth, Zeke remarked to the other warriors. All of them, except for Rayna, were lounging around in Zeke's office. Annie and Porco sat in different chairs while Bertolt was resting on the couch. Pike wringed some water out of a rag before placing it on his forehead. So 4 million years of battle, Porco remarked. We can barely live past a century, and they've spent their lives fighting. I can only imagine the struggles of you guys trying to stay alive, Pike admitted. If I was there, if I took the power of the armored titan. What exactly could you have done? Annie demanded. You have no idea what it was like fighting the both of them. I had to struggle to stay alive, and they weren't even using their full strength. Maybe my brother would still be alive, Porco retorted. He's gone, Annie declared. The flying titan took him, and they most likely found a way to feed him to some other titan. How would they even know that? Porco demanded. The king of the walls experimented on me. Now I have this stupid Energon in my systems, Annie answered. They found information given by Grisha Jaeger. They found the port. They forced the information out of Bertolt. They most likely found some spinal fluid to give to someone so they could devour Marcel. I refuse to believe my brother is dead, Porco declared. We may have to assume the worst, Porco, Zeke declared. Marcel is either captured or dead. Porco grimaced before standing up. Then I'll find a way to get the Jaws Titan back. Annie watched as Porco walked out of the room before hanging her head. She hated lying about this, but it was already too late to tell the truth. Zeke noticed Annie's weary expression before walking over to his desk and pulling out his cigarettes and matches. I'm going to be smoking in here, Zeke informed. Could you please take Bertolt to another room? I don't know how this dark Energon may react. The last thing I want is for him to feel worse. Annie nodded her head before walking over to Bertolt and lifting him over her shoulders. Pike did her best to help due to her crutches by easing the weight off of Annie. They dragged Bertolt's unconscious form out of the room, allowing Zeke to light a cigarette. He put out the match and put the cigarette to his lips, deeply inhaling before exhaling the smoke. He watched it leave his mouth and let it linger in the air. He then took the phone on his desk and dialed a number before placing said phone against his ear, waiting for the person in the other end to pick up. Zeke, what a pleasant surprise, a female voice said from the other end. It's been a while since you've called and asked for help. There's been a complication, Yelena, Zeke explained. The flying titan aligned himself with the island. The flying titan, Yelena trailed off, as if trying to recall something. The titan you encountered after you faced the metal one. And the one you decided to withhold from Commander Calvi. They're both of the same species, Zeke said, and according to Rayna's intel, they might know each other. Fascinating, Yelena said with a hint of excitement in her voice. More gods walk among us. Any endeavors to the island has been delayed until further notice, Zeke informed. I'll try to persuade Calvi to send a ship or something to the island so that you and Oniakopon can make contact with Eren Yeager. I'll be extremely excited to meet your little brother, Yelena proclaimed. But what about the metal titan that you angered? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Zeke declared while rubbing his neck of a bruise that wasn't there. He's not our objective. But he might be an obstacle, Yelena reminded. We still need Eren to agree with us in order for your plan to work, right? Of course, Zeke answered before staring out the window, but it may take a little longer than expected. I'm with you every step of the way, Yelena declared. The next day, the information regarding what happened on Paradise Island was published to the public. It made headlines across the nation, and started a national debate as to what exactly they were dealing with. The government debated whether they should to withhold information regarding Optimus and the Flying Titan's origins, but decided to tell the public. There was already going to be a mass panic in revealing these Titans' existence. Withholding the information would have given Paradise an advantage, and they weren't going to let them continue having the lead they already had. Of course, this spawned a mass panic and debates of multiple varieties. Some questioned the legitimacy of the information, and wondered if the warriors were lying to save their skin. But Magath made sure to put in his own input to ensure that people believed the truth. That didn't stop Malians from not believing the information. Others have accepted it. They believed that these two titans existed, and that they might even be a bigger threat than the demons themselves. However, many were discussing the fact regarding their origins. There was life outside of their world, which many did not believe and were trying to wrap their heads around it. A civilization far more advanced than anyone could ever dream. Were there other worlds like that? Different types of life on different planets? Many were fascinated and fearful at the idea, but many were also scared at the prospect of these titans. One was faster than any vehicle in their artillery, the other had the ability to fly. They easily bested their strongest weapons in combat. Overall, many were terrified and angry, because the two most powerful beings in all of existence fell into the hands of the demons. Were they gods, or were they devils? None of them were sure. Magath stared out the window of his room, looking down at the people in the street view to see them talking with worry about the information they just learned. He tried to convince Commander Kelvy to withhold the information for some time, but he suggested they release it sooner than later. Everyone would be more alert that way. However, that didn't stop the prospect of this information spreading globally to other countries. Once they heard of the failure of the warriors, no doubt they would try to go to war. He would hope that they won't, but the prospect was still in the air. Magath recalled the flying titan bowing to them and grimaced. They knew the name of the metal titan, and knew some things about them, but they knew nothing of the flying titan. Not even his name. All they knew was that he was willing to play the role of a monster. The warriors, excluding Zeke, looked up at the gated internment zone of their home, Liberio. After Bertolt rested and Raina wrote the report, they were ordered by Commander Magath to go back to their hometown. Pike stared back at Bertolt, Raina, and Annie and smiled. "Welcome home." Porco watched Pike walk through the gate before glowering at Raina. "I have to tell my parents about my brother," Porco reminded, "and of your incompetence." "Porco, it wasn't his fault," Bertolt retorted. Porco merely scowled before walking inside the internment zone. The remaining three looked at each other before walking into the internment zone together. The three stared in surprise as they saw a small crowd awaiting them. The crowd looked at the three in sadness and sorrow, making the three come to the conclusion that they heard the news about the island. The three suddenly heard crying as they turning to see Porco's parents grieving as they held their only child left. Porco looked ready to cry, but he held in his tears and guided his parents back to their home. "Raina!" a voice shouted. Raina turned to see a blonde woman running to him with a smile on her face. He grunted as the woman gave him a tight hug. "You're home, my son." She smiled as tears came down her face. "My warrior." Mum," Raina stuttered. "Bertolt," a voice spoke. Bertolt turned and saw his mother walking to him. He was about to smile, but noticed her distressed expression. "Mom," Bertolt began as he walked up to her, "what happened?" "Your father," she began. "Your father is sick, and he's not getting better. The doctor said that he's been in a coma for days." She began to cry as she gripped his shirt. "He might not." Bertolt tried to process the information, but grabbed his mother and looked her in the eyes. "Take me to him." She nodded her head as she guided him to the Eldian hospital. Raina looked on in guilt at his friend before his mother let him go and caressed his cheek. "You're all right," she smiled with tears in her eyes, "my precious warrior. You came home, and you're not hurt." Raina felt the guilt inside of him worsen as he stared at the ground instead. His mother tried to comfort him but he merely shook his head. "I need time," Raina said. "Oh, well, of course," she said, "we'll find a way to get the demons. I know you will. I'll cook you a nice meal, to welcome you home." Raina wasn't necessarily able to refuse as his mother took him back to their home. Annie watched Raina's stricken expression, but didn't pay mind to it as someone else came into view. A middle-aged man with black hair and cane in hand came walking up to her before standing still, leaning on said cane for support. "Father," Annie greeted with bated breath. Annie, her father greeted back before smiling. You kept your promise. Further. I've changed, Annie began. I'm not the same person I was when I left. Both physically and mentally. I don't even know what's coursing in me now, so please don't expect me to be the same person. Mr. Leonhardt didn't respond as he walked up to his daughter and gave her the best hug that he could offer. I don't care if you're the same person, he whispered. I know you won't be, but you came back home. That's all I wanted for you. Thank you for keeping your promise. Annie was startled by her father's declaration and almost looked ready to cry tears of joy, but she stopped when she remembered the flying Titan, and the threat he placed on her father. The Titan shifter managed to hold back her emotions as she wrapped her arms around her father. This may be the last chance she can truly hold the man before the inevitable comes. Her father would be doomed, and so would everyone else. 4 months later, in another town. When do you think the island devils will attack with their new weapons? A man asked his friend as they walked down the street. Who knows, the other admitted. Honestly, I don't know which one is more of a threat, the Titans in the walls or the ones from another planet. The idea of life outside of this world is still bizarre, the first man remarked. Not bizarre enough to prevent a war with the Middle Eastern nations, the second man grumbled. We don't need this. But the situation is still serious, the first man said. I hear that the Tiber family might get involved, and are heading to the Mali military headquarters. That's so? The second man questioned. They never get involved in anything, not after they helped destroy the Eldian Empire. Before the first man could add anything, he bumped into someone that wasn't necessarily watching where they were going. He was going to shout at them, but held his tongue as he saw the man's face littered with multiple scars. He had gray hair and wore a buttoned-up gray trench coat with a bag over his shoulders and a map in his hands. But the thing that threw the off the most was his intense gaze with those odd red eyes. Sorry, the first man apologized. I didn't watch where I was going, the newcomer reasoned. I'm just irritated because these maps seem to grow more and more complicated by the day. What do you need help with? The second man offered. I'm trying to find the train station, the newcomer explained. I've been walking on foot for days and I need a fast way to get to where I'm going. Oh, well, the train station is actually just up ahead if you continue walking down the road, the second man explained. Routes should be listed over there to help. The newcomer hummed in response before walking off, leaving the two in a slight daze. Man, he didn't even thank us, the second man remarked. You kidding me? The first man exclaimed. He looked ready to rip my face off. Megatron looked down at the map in his hands once more before scowling and folding it before putting it in the bag. These things were so primitive it made him want to scream his head off. He hated this. He couldn't believe he even agreed to do this 2 months ago. He never thought that he would infiltrate humans and walk among them like he was inferior. When proposed the idea, he should have rent the mad scientist's throat when he had the chance. But it was too late, and he had to follow the objective at hand, infiltrating Mali and finding a way to destroy them from within.
Well, that's the ending of that chapter. I do hope you enjoy this video. If you like to see more, remember to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment down below. Until next time.